Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host 𝙒𝙖𝙩𝙤. Lt Gen Ravi Shankar has been on our channel quite frequently. We've talked about a lot of things, and today we'll hear from him about his take on the evolving situation in Ukraine. We know that the Russians are now concentrating on the two eastern provinces, collectively called as Donbass, and these are plains, and the fighting strategy probably has changed. They want the Ukrainian army out in the open field as opposed to the guerrilla warfare that was happening before. Well, we'll get all that, a 360-degree perspective and more from the good general. General Ravi Shankar, namaskaram and welcome to PGurus channel, sir.
Namaskaram and thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me on the channel once again. A very good evening to all the viewers, and we can start.
Sir, I read with interest your article today in Gunner
Yeah,
Shot. Viewers,
yeah.
you should always read that as a reference because I'm sure there will be more things that will come out today in this conversation, but it's an excellent article. I don't know where the journal has a time to churn out such high quality articles so proficiently. I mean, you are very, very proficient, and I'm just blown away. Sir, my question to you is, do you think my read that now the war has moved to plains where the fighting strategy itself changes, and this might actually help the Russians more than the Ukrainians? That's how I see it. What are your thoughts, sir?
Let's put it this way: there's a new phase of the war,
Yes.
right? Look, that entire Ukraine is plains. There's nothing different. It's just that the Russians have shifted to the east. They've refocused to the east. Earlier, if you remember, they were coming down from Belarus to Kyiv. They're from Crimea. They were trying to go up north, and they got stuck. And then they withdrew from Kyiv, and then they said they'll, refocus on the eastern areas, right? And as early as on the first week of March, right, uh, Mr. Putin had said, "I have four conditions for which, by which I'll terminate this war." The first condition was that Ukraine should be part of NATO. I'm reiterating this. The second condition was that, Donetsk and Luhansk will be independent states. Third was Crimea will be recognized as part of Russia. And this fourth condition was that complete demilitarization of Ukraine. Right. The first has been virtually achieved. That got achieved at that time itself. The other three conditions were not achieved, for whatever reason, right? Russia couldn't prosecute the war properly. They were not prepared for it. They're not planned for it. Logistics problems. They were clumsy in the way they conducted operations and all that. And then when they found that they were not making any headway, they've withdrawn from Kyiv and they've swung east. Right. Now they've concentrated completely to the east and they're basing their entire operations from the Donbass area and from the area which they had taken, hold of earlier. That is the areas north of the Crimean Peninsula. Can we have a
Yes,
map?
sir. I'm adding that.
Yeah. Oh,
Here we
yeah.
go.
Now, if you look at it, the area to the south, that is the area which is, this area from Melitopol to Mariupol. And all this area has been now captured by Russia. The area in the north, if you see all the pink areas, has been again captured by Russia. Okay. And in the past, from about 27, 28 March till now, almost 2 weeks, what Russia has done is they've reinforced this area, this Donbass region, and they've vacated Kyiv, and they've come here, and they have but just before this, they captured this point called Izium, which is in the north, from where three arrows are coming off. Now, that's a very central point which they could get hold of, right? And they concentrated a lot of forces behind that. And then in the south, if you see Mariupol is almost finished. In fact, Putin has said that it is a liberated area. So most of their operations there are finished and they've consolidated the area. So the forces down there are all free. Okay. Now let me explain to you. If you see what the areas in the pink onto the east are the Russian and the earlier pro-Russian forces. On the west, where in the lighter shade, are all where Ukraine forces are. They're the front lines. Now, what is Russia trying? Now, Russia is trying, say, from the north, they'll start their offensives. They might head towards Kramatorsk, that Kramatorsk, which is the arrow, small arrow coming straight down south,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
key
yeah.
area. Then they could go, one odd portion could go to further to the east and also to the west towards Dnipro. Now, from the south, anywhere between Donetsk and Zaporozhye, if you see where they are holding, they could launch 2-3 offensives to the north. And one offensive could go and join up with Kramatorsk again, and one could go in the outer and get hold of Dnipro. What are they doing in this? They are actually going to trap the Ukrainians. That's the plan, if you notice. There are
Oh,
some
you mean the
battle,
Ukrainian army that is stuck in
yeah,
Donbass?
which is stuck in Donbass.
Yeah.
Opposite, they are all, you see, the Ukrainians are caught now, actually. When they were fighting along this, they were resisting the Russians all along, fine. When the Russians vacated Kiev, a lot of Ukrainian forces went and took over those areas, did counterattacks and took over those areas. Now those forces can't come here; they're spread out.
Right.
Because if they come down, then from Belarus people will come down again. So the Kiev forces are stuck there. Some forces are stuck here. And for the past 15-20 days, the Russians have been methodically carrying out strikes in the rear. They've hit fuel dams, they've hit ammunition dams, any military installation they've hit. They've hit Ukrainian forces wherever they've suspected Ukrainian forces are. They've used air force, they've used missiles, they've used artillery and everything. Right? So, I mean, the way I look at it, the Russians are have almost fixed the Ukrainians, and they're trying to encircle them. This encirclement and small pincers will go when they'll start trapping the Ukrainian forces once they get an initial breakthrough. But then, this is my way of thinking. This is what I would do, and this is what I feel that they're doing from what reports that we've got. But will it happen further is a $1 million question. Let me tell you why. The $1 million question is there's a phenomenon called the Rasputitsa. Rasputitsa is the thaw of the mud. That would be happening now. So the general area around the countryside is still muddy. It's not possible. You can't do widespread maneuvers. Right? So if the Russians continue to go along the roads like they did in Kiev and tracks, they'll have a problem. Then the Ukrainians will confront them and it's going to be a slogging match. So can the Russians get off the road, do some, maneuvers here and there, pull the Ukrainians out of their position and then fix them and then capture them is the question. Are the Russians trained to do this? I don't know. Are they motivated to do this? I don't know. But I suppose it'll come out, right? So it's going to be an interesting thing. On the other hand, the Ukrainians are in a position where they cannot do much reinforcement, they can't do much movement. They are a dwindling force, they're getting decimated by the day, right? But they've shown tremendous spirit to fight, and they're delaying the whole thing. We thought that the Ukrainians will pack up in the first week. Then we thought in the second week they'll pack up, and now it's nearly knocking 2 months. And now it appears that USA and the NATO allies are trying to pump in heavy equipment. And if they can manage to pump in heavy equipment and arm the Ukrainians, then we are going to look at a different story. Okay, so this battle is now is in a phase where it could be decisive one way or the other. But there's a larger question. Whatever the outcome of this battle, right? Will it achieve peace? Will this war end? That's the $1 million question in this. Let me explain. Russia has said that whatever territory it's captured, we're going to keep it with us and we're not going to return it. And we're going to hold a referendum to say of the people there where they'll go, and then we'll decide what to do. It's finders keepers, or 90% of the argument is possession. So Russia is not going to give. Ukraine can't overpower Russia. So how does this war end? I mean, ultimately, this is a war where no one is going to win, no one is going to lose. I've made it very clear. There are three conditions for this war to end, the way I look at it. Either Ukraine gets destroyed, or Russia loses, or they go in for a negotiated settlement. Now, the chances of Ukraine getting completely destroyed are remote because the western part of Ukraine is still intact, and the Russians this time are not hitting the infrastructure in the eastern part too much because they have to use it later on. They're only going after military targets, in which case Ukraine doesn't get destroyed. If more thing misery comes, Ukrainian morale will get hardened, and that's how the whole thing is going. So I don't see Ukraine getting destroyed. If and I also don't see Russia getting defeated, even if NATO forces, keep feeding Ukrainian forces and keep bleeding Russia into a protracted war. Russia is not going to collapse. That's very clear. Despite all the news coming out about economic sanctions and all those things, nothing seems to have worked on Russia. It might work later, but right now it's not bringing any effect on the battlefield or on Russian action. So that Russia getting defeated is not an option. Negotiated settlement, that again, uh, in a negotiated settlement, will Zelensky and NATO agree to anything? Will NATO? I mean, the settlement has to be where everyone can boast of a win. So the chances of that settlement coming up is also quite dim. And NATO, if a settlement happens at this stage and Russia gets to keep all these areas free of cost, it will be a NATO loss and a Ukrainian loss. They'll not agree to it. So there are angles to it. So I feel that there's a requirement for someone to mediate, and that mediation slowly is coming around to the fact that by elimination, Turkey is not acceptable, Israel is too small, China is not acceptable. It will come down to USA. I'm sorry, India. Because our Prime Minister has also told President Biden that I've tried to speak to both. Ukraine has at one stage said, come and mediate. So has Russia. I think someone from Finland also made this remark. So I see an increasing role for India to mediate, and I think it will come about. You know, once these people come to the realization that winning this battle won't lead to a political settlement either way, winning or losing either way, will not lead to a cannot lead to a political settlement, and if it has to continue, someone has to mediate. So let us see how it goes. So this is my overall take on what's happening. I put it in very clear words in my article. I would request everyone to go through that and you put your comments or ask me questions separately. But for now, any questions, I'm prepared to take. Any more discussion you want me to throw open, I'm okay.
General Ravi Shankar, one of the biggest weaponry that they were having, the Ukrainians were having, were these drones that were able to javelins, and then the thing that starts with the letter B from Barkatia or
Gunfights.
something like,
Yeah,
yeah,
Barkatia drones.
drones. So these seem to have at least stopped the tank movement in the densely populated cities. Now, the area where the fighting is going on now, I don't think that is densely populated. It's probably more like the agricultural area of Ukraine. What would you do if you were Ukraine today?
Look, I mean, Ukraine is in a tight situation. It's not as if their drones are not there and their javelins are not there, and they're saying, they have to fight in small teams. They have to carry out ambushes. They have to show some front where they can hold the Russians, uh, and they have to be mobile, go cross country, hit Russia from the side. And again, it depends on how much the Russians can maneuver. If the Russians start maneuvering by some this thing in the open, and if the ground is hard enough for tanks to get into the open, then Ukraine is almost done, right? But if that doesn't happen, and if Russia sticks to the roads and they then, and we've seen that Russia has a weakness of its infantry. Its infantry has not performed so well so far. So if that happens, then the Ukrainians who have done well earlier will continue to doing well, right? It depends. I mean, the whole thing will come out in the next 2-3 days. So far, Russia has just caught hold of 2-3 places which are pivots from where it can start operating, right? The capable, this look, the country might be flat and open. Let me make it clear, but is it possible? Is it maneuverable? Can you carry out maneuver in this terrain where there is a mud toss still? It's not hard enough. It's very difficult for even people to move. Okay, but Ukraine has got one great advantage. They know the terrain. They know the lanes. They know the tracks. They know the foot tracks in all these places. They know the villages, and if they use the local aid, they can outflank the Russians and hit them hard. And this entire battle might seem to be a big battle, but it's going to be fought at the company level, battery level, and squadron level.
I have some friends in Ukraine who were part of a development team that I had worked with, and they are Russian speaking. They were in the University of Mykolaiv area. There's a city in Mykolaiv, and it's between Odessa and Mariupol. They didn't really want the Russians to come and occupy. I mean, there was this conception that east of the line that separates, if you draw a line between Kiev and Odessa, the eastern part of that was considered Russian speaking, and therefore it was thought that that part would be more amenable to a Russian presence. I mean, my take was that Ukrainians liked the fact that they had a democracy, even if it was an imperfect one, and that they didn't really want the Russians to come over and take over that part. Now, so this could be an uneasy calm, even if Russia manages to take a few cities, isn't it?
Look, in the overall sense, whatever area Russia takes over, it's not going to give away. That's very clear. Okay. And whatever area Russia takes over, those people who are, anti-Russian or not for Russia and are pro-Ukrainian will go out. So what will be left there? I mean, it's logic. There is a lot of people who have gone out, refugees have gone out. There's internal displacement has taken place. Internal displacement come refugees. The figure is something like 12 million. Complete Ukraine population is 42 million.
44, yeah.
44 million. Virtually, if 12 million people have gone, it will be from this area. That means 50% of this area they've gone already out. So who's left? Only those people who are confident about Russian occupation are left. So if they take over their area, and even if they tomorrow have a referendum, they'll go. We are talking of a situation earlier. That situation has changed now. So
yes, indeed, and it's very, very sad because
it's sad. The thing is that we are looking at an impending breakup of Ukraine.
Right.
Okay.
It will go back to the map of 1956, I guess.
Yeah, if you show the map, we can. I mean, get that picture on. We can generally. Yeah. If you look at it, the way I look at it, any line. If you draw a line from Izium to Zaporozhye, something in that area to the west or to the east will all become
Ukraine,
east and south.
Right. Russia. Sorry.
Russia. I haven't said Russia, whether it's Donetsk or Luhansk. We don't know what will be the shape, or whether it will be amalgamated with Russia. We don't know how things will play out. That's the two choices, isn't it? Either leave them as independent republics, or become part of Russia, or they could be a mediated settlement, give everything back to Russia, but give these two areas a lot of autonomy.
Right.
I mean, let's see how the politics play out. They have to go back to the Minsk I and the Minsk II agreements, which people have forgotten.
Yes.
Right.
But that's something that the Ukrainians don't want to.
Yeah, so Ukrainians don't want. That's why I said, look, the negotiated settlement has to be mediated, and that mediation has to be based on history, the agreements gone through, someone who's savvy enough to make them talk and make them look. I feel that, like Clausewitz said, war is an extension of politics by other means, and politics is an extension of war by other means. We come to
Right.
the stage to now where this military business is going to end, and people have to start negotiating. And it is incumbent on the part of USA and NATO also to start negotiating if they want to end this war.
Right.
It's very important, because if they don't end this war, USA especially, and it gets bogged down with Russia in this place, okay, it is losing sight of the bigger problem in China.
Yes. So true. All right,
Right?
sir. Let's. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I thought you were done. Sorry, sir. Yeah.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. So let's take some questions now, please.
Sure.
There are four or five questions,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Go ahead. Rohit SS wants to know, why can't Ukraine declare victory and start ignoring Putin? Anyways, Russia's army turned out to be losers. Let them keep fighting in Donbass. Any thoughts?
No. How can Ukraine declare victory at this point? Ukraine army is on the verge of getting wrapped up. Okay,
That would be
there's
a
no way
significant bargaining piece, right?
yeah, they are fighting for their land and for their life. I mean, war is not, and let's remember, Ukraine is not a superpower like USA, which can declare a victory after losing, right? So I don't think this can be. And Russian army is not a loser. Let's also be very clear about that. I'm not for Russia. I'm not for Ukraine. I'm giving you a balanced analysis. Russia has not executed its operations well, but it has not lost anything. The cost it has going to pay for the gains it has got militarily and eventually politically might be too high. That's a different story, right? This is a war so far where everyone can talk in terms of victory without being a victor. I've already written all three actors: Ukraine, Russia, NATO, USA. All three are losing. The winners are elsewhere.
China.
China.
So true. Mandar Karnik wants to know, sir, what is preventing Russia from encircling cities and then moving on? Why tie up in street fighting when you can starve them out?
Yeah, I agree with him, but I don't. There's no evidence of Russia having encircled any city and getting stuck in street fighting and all, except in Mariupol. Mariupol they had to take, because without Mariupol, the land bridge between what they had captured north of Crimea and the rest of Donetsk and Luhansk wouldn't have happened. So they had to reduce Mariupol, which they've done. Right. So other than that, the other cities have just fallen to them. And where they could not, and Izium they had to capture, because, like I showed in the map, Izium was a focal point. If you don't capture Izium, you don't go. Yeah. If you see, Izium is a focal point. If you don't capture Izium, you can't go forward anywhere. That they captured. Kharkiv they couldn't capture, they left. Small towns, anyway, they're not of much importance. The rest of the places they are holding. So they've done this. Even Kiev. Many people said, look, Russia failed to capture Kiev. I agree. They failed to capture Kiev in the initial stages. Once they felt that it was out of reach, they didn't enter Kiev. They just held, put the pressure there, kept doing all this bombardment, this, that, and all that, and they went back. Okay. So they've done that. What Russia has fundamentally done is their initial planning itself was out of sync. I think they've come out with a plan which they didn't want to do, or rather they didn't expect to do. Their expectation was different. So that's why you see them being labeled as losers.
Next question from SRDR. Sir, is this a war result of too much power concentration in the hands of an autocrat? What is the chance India might face a similar threat in the future from a similar autocrat Xi?
Yeah, any autocrat with a lot of power will take this decision. Okay, let's not be. I'm not again for Putin. Putin had to do it for other reasons, but he had other choices also. As much as Putin had concentration of power in his hands to execute this war, and he did, he had better choices, right? So this danger is there. Will Z do it? He tried it. I mean, let's be very clear. He tried it
Right.
in Eastern Ladakh. The difference is that we stopped them from doing it. And then we force. Again, I keep repeating this. Many people don't agree with me. Have you heard of the modern PLA taking a step back once it has captured an area? What happened in Eastern Ladakh? They captured Finger 4. Between Finger 4 and Finger 8, they put a map of China and beamed it through satellite and showed it to the world that this is China. 2 months later, when we outmaneuvered them in the Kailash ranges, we made them break those defenses which they had made and go back 8 kilometers after rubbing off that flag of China on that ground. So it is possible, what you're saying, and that's what they attempted. If we couldn't do that, we would have lost that area and maybe more. So what you're saying is right. A democratic process has better chance of doing a stable thing. But let me give you a flip to this. You see the wars of America. You have a complete democratic process there. Yet they have done many things as similar to what Mr. Putin has done in Ukraine. The logic of America going into Iraq the second time is even worse than what has happened now. Right? So this is this thing. Yeah.
Mandar Karnik again, what are the lessons for battlefield tactics based on Ukraine and Azerbaijan Armenia wars?
See, the battlefield tactics for Ukraine are a little different from Azerbaijan and Armenia. We have to realize Azerbaijan and Armenia were limited in scope and extent, whereas this has been a full-scale war over wide frontages. Right? There are many lessons which are coming out. This war is not finished. The lessons are not crystal clear. There are trend lines which are emerging. What are the trend lines which are emerging? The trend lines which are emerging is that the first trend line, in fact, that's a great lesson, that war is bloody and violent and it's not going to change. All this cyber and AI and all that won't change the nature of war and violence. Right? The second thing is firepower and application of integrated firepower has to be done with a little more thought, because that's how it is going to be. You got to adapt to the terrain. There are questions asked, are the days of the tanks done and over? Right? But then I have a different view. The day of the tanks are not over. If you take this model, because this is a flawed model where the tanks could not deploy, and Russia put in too much armor in a place where they couldn't fan out. If the tanks are employed imaginatively in open terrain, the results will be different. Then the major thing is that Russia didn't have its infantry well trained to get hold of small posts, eradicate all these ambushes and cover, because there's always something fundamental called the infantry tank cooperation, which all of us have learned when we were youngsters. I see that missing. You have to get back to old stories. I won't say stories, old habits in war, or basics. All those basics are missing. There's a major thing that which I worried about, to be very honest, is that the Russian conscript, a young chap, untrained guy, has been found to be unfit in war. He's not fought well. No army loses so many generals. The Russians have lost a lot of generals. Why were the generals lost? Were they far too in front and exposed themselves? If the generals have to be so far ahead in front and the frontline troops are not working, if the frontline troops are not working, they're not well trained. Conscripts for 1-2 years who come, they can't withstand the rigor of battlefield. We have a similar plan in India. I see it in the newspapers. I'm terribly worried about it. It's called that Agniveer and the Agnipath program, where we are going to have men for 3 years, and then they'll go do whatever they have to do. But for just for 3 years in the army, 1 year of training and 2 years in the army, he'll not be a good soldier. There are many questions. I mean, that's something which we have to learn, and we have to handle this Agnipath and Agniveer program very, very consciously, very carefully. And what, to me, that's the biggest lesson. What is that India has which others don't have? A fighting fit army which is experienced. An experienced, if we had to execute this operation like Russia had to do, we would have done far better. That I have no doubts at all. The difference between us and the PLA were a well-trained army. The well-trained army offset all our equipment problems. It offset all our logistics stamina. All the advantages which PLA had came to naught because of our experienced army. If that is going to be diluted, we are going to be in problems. That, for me, is the biggest lesson.
Next question, please. Sunil Kaul wants to know, good evening. My question is, why our media shows Russia is losing badly?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And this is a dichotomy in our system, or rather in India. The Western media is constantly showing Russia as losing, right? And that's their narrative, right from day one, that Russia is losing. Now, if Russia has lost so much, then they're still getting onto the offensive. It's not possible, and they've captured a lot of area and they've degraded Ukraine considerably. So it's not really losing. The Indian media is following the Western media. I mean, it's debatable whether they're losing or not. Like I said, victory, the difference between victory and defeat is how much cost are you going to pay. Has Russia paid enough cost? We'll see. That will come out at the end of the whole story. But then, at this point of time, the Western media is painting a narrative. Indian media is following that narrative completely. I don't see even one media channel in India who doesn't follow the Western narrative. But the Indian government is following a different track altogether. There's a huge dichotomy in our system today. What our government is speaking, what everyone is this thing, and what our international stand is, that, why are we doing that? And this, the narrative and the war are two different things. I agree with Mr. Kaul when he says this. Why is it growing? It's a thing I cannot even understand.
Michael Lauret wants to know, who and what is under Azov steel factory? Both sides are very focused on it.
Yeah, that's a very fair question. I think the remnants of the Ukrainian forces are in the Azov steel factory. What comes out in the media is that the Azov battalion, who was supposed to be a far-right activist battalion, which has been given regular status in the Ukrainian army, are the ones who are fighting there, and they're trapped, right? So that's what the Russians want to get hold of. They want the Azov steel factory. I mean, even today I saw that Mr. Putin has said, don't destroy the steel factory, but don't let a fly go out also. That's what his exact words were. So they're going to get hold of them and slowly starve them out or reduce them and, finish them off. But I think one of their aims of denazification, as with, might get solved. We don't know. Let the reality come out.
And SRDR wants to know, sir, why did Russia resort to such brutality in Bucha? They call Ukrainian people as brothers. Have they lost the Ukrainian brotherhood forever?
Let me put this thing. I think they've lost the Ukrainian brotherhood forever. That I agree with completely. Why did Russia resort to such brutality in Bucha? I would say at this point of time, I really can't answer. Because there are two sides to the narratives. Has Russia done it or has Ukraine staged it? Right. But let's assume that Russia has done it. The first question I'll ask is, why has Russia not done it elsewhere? They could have done it elsewhere also. Why only at Buka? Right? Is it a local phenomenon of that local commander who's, gone a little off? We've heard, even if you see the history of war, it is that one odd guy, one odd commander who does everything, not as per Geneva Conventions and not as per fundamental rules of war, the unspoken, courage of a soldier, that he treats his enemies well, right? The unwritten rule of a soldier is that you might fight, but at the end of the day, you respect the opponent soldier. That guy is probably the local commander in Buka has probably violated this. He might be a psychopath, who knows? It'll come out. So at this point of time, for me to say, has Russia done it? I think it's wrong. But has someone in Buka done it? Yes. Has it been the local commander? Might be. Has it been staged? Might be. Let us see. Again, I would try to take a balanced view on this. Have we heard of this kind of brutality elsewhere? After all, they came through Chernihiv and Chernobyl and went back. They came to Kharkiv and they've readjusted. They've also come towards the south to Melitopol and Mykolaiv and all these places. We've not seen such brutality. So let us see. I can't answer this at this point of time also.
Well, thank you so much, General Ravi Shankar, and that was a fascinating conversation. Like always, you get to hear things that you don't get in the MSM at PGurus. So please, please, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Thank you very much, General. Namaskar.